All right, we're live. Hello, everybody. Good to see you. I'm so excited for everybody to be here. Let's see where folks are tuning in from. We've got folks tuning in from Nicaragua. We've got folks from Kenya, from
Hey,
Spain, from the UK, from everywhere. Oh, this makes me so happy. Yeah, I'm so honored and excited to have Rizèl Scarlett here with us. Hello, Rizèl.
hey, and thanks for having me here. I'm definitely honored to be here, and I'm excited to teach people about Git.
Yeah. Wow, this is gonna be so much fun. Let's see, folks. I'd love to introduce Rizèl a little bit, if I may.
Yeah,
Rizèl, you're tuning in from Boston. You are a developer advocate at GitHub. You are director of programming at G Code
yep, that's
House. Is
right.
that? Yeah, awesome.
Yeah, that's right.
and
We
uh,
call it G Code or G Code House. Yeah. Go ahead.
and yeah, I'd love to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, sure. So basically, I am a non-traditional software engineer, or that's how I started off. I did boot camp just like y'all, and after a couple years of going through software engineering, maybe about 3 years, I eventually got into developer advocacy, and like things I care about most are like helping people get into tech and just discovering and exploring new things.
Awesome. I'd love to share, if I may, also how I met you, Rizèl. I found so before you and I met, I actually found an article from you that I wanted to share with the chat today that really told me that really like spoke to my heart. And that was an article on conquering the fear of getting into open source. So I'm going to post that in the chat here. Conquering the fear of contributing to open source. And this was a wonderful article, if I may say.
Thank
Um,
you.
it spoke so much to what I had felt for a long time before starting to contribute to open source, but also on occasion when I see a big open source project, feel to this day. So I just want to say thank you so much for sharing that.
No, thank you. I was honestly just writing my thoughts and being like, "Oh, this was scary, but I'm glad I like got over it." And it's actually really fun to contribute to open source.
Absolutely. Yeah. I will absolutely post that article in Discord too. Thank you. um, yeah, so today you're going to tell us a little bit about Git, which
Yeah.
is a version control tool that is, correct me if I'm wrong, used by, I would say, pretty much most, if not all, software developers nowadays.
Yeah, it's definitely like the majority use Git, and then the majority use GitHub as well. About 73 million users, I think.
Whoa,
Yeah.
that's awesome. All right, well, I don't want to keep you all. This is going to be so much fun. Rizal's going to show us a presentation on her
Yeah, let me
introduction
start
to Git.
sharing.
And folks, we will definitely have a Q&A session at the end of this. So please, if you've got any questions on Git, please feel free to ask them. And well, looks like we're good to go. So I will keep myself out. Rizèl, I want to say all the best and thank you so much once again.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks for the awesome intro. All right, y'all. So today we're going to be talking about Git. This is a very beginner's guide to Git and GitHub. If you've like never used Git before or GitHub and you've been meaning to or you're thinking about it, I'll give you a little bit of an intro of some of the fundamentals. So I always like to start off with a little bit of a story. So here's what I'm going to talk about. Basically, there's so many new terms and technologies to learn in software engineering, and it can get overwhelming and a little confusing at times. So back when I was in coding boot camp, like in 2018, I was very confused with a lot of the terms. Like I thought Java was short for JavaScript, and I thought Git was short for GitHub. But that's not the case. As y'all know, you're in a JavaScript bootcamp right now. Java and JavaScript are not the same thing, and Git and GitHub are not the same either. What's wild is like right now, I work at GitHub. So I just want to remind y'all, I know you guys are learning right now, and I want to remind you to like write down whatever goals you have, even if they seem impossible, speak it into existence. Because who would have thought like this person who doesn't even know the difference between Git or GitHub, or at least at the time, would eventually work at GitHub in the end. So let's I kind of did an intro of myself, but I guess I'll repeat it a little bit. I'm a developer advocate at GitHub. I've been a software engineer for about 3 years. I'm also a program director at G Code House, which Ramon mentioned, and that's basically a program to help women of color and non-binary people of color learn to code. Like I mentioned, I'm super passionate about empowering and educating people about tech. And I also have an addiction for Twitter. So I'm like always tweeting. And I would say you should follow me on Twitter or any of these other platforms, whether it's Hashnode, GitHub, Dev.to. I will love to interact with you. And I also like to post a lot of good beginner content that I think may be helpful for you or useful. All right, so let's get back to like the main topic here, Git and GitHub. What's the difference? Why are we using them? And I'll start off with Git. As Ramon mentioned, Git is a version control system. And you're like, okay, cool. But what's a version control system? And a version control system is something that enables you to record snapshots of your project as you save the changes you make throughout history. And I'll give a bit more of an applicable explanation so that this makes more sense to you. All right, so on the left here is a screenshot of some of the resumes I have in my Google Drive. As you can see, this is a lot, and I couldn't even fit the whole picture in here, or it would be too long for the slide. But basically, I have this many versions because over the years I've like submitted things for scholarships or different software engineering roles or internships or developer advocate roles, and I wanted to like emphasize something new or say, okay, like basically if I was applying for a developer advocate role, I would emphasize community a little bit more. But if I was applying for a software engineering role, I would like emphasize some software engineering stuff. The hard part about this is I couldn't tell you which resume is for what, right? Like Rizèl's resume 1 versus Rizèl's resume 4, I don't know the difference or why. So it's a little hard to keep track of because they're poorly named, they're not well organized. Now imagine if you're working in a large code base with hundreds of files and you're also working with multiple people. That makes it even harder to figure out what's the latest version, which version you want to be using, and why. So in larger code bases, here's just an example of like different quote unquote versions that you may have. You may have like the production version of your code, and that's the code that everyone or all the users who are like on your site are currently interacting with and seeing. And maybe they'll say like, hey, I found a bug. So then you'll make a copy on your local computer, that's your version of that code, and then you'll fix the bug or you'll add a new feature. And once you fix that bug or add a new feature, before you put it in production, you'll add it to another version of the code base called staging. And this is where all the developers add their changes, and you get to test it out to see if anything has broken and if it's good to go to push up to production. So there's definitely more versions in other code bases, but these are like the three main ones that you may have. And you want to make sure you're able to manage all these because you may have, like I said, hundreds of files, and maybe you have a developer team of maybe 5 people. You don't want to get confused as to what's the production version on June 1st versus the production version on January 1st. So, like I said, Git manages those versions for you. And it's really hard to manage all of that on your own or manually. It can be stressful, you can make mistakes, so just let Git do it for you. And the cool thing about Git is it tells you what the latest version is, it tells you who made those specific changes, and it also has notes on why those changes were made. So, where do you use Git? You often use it in this thing called the terminal, or for Windows users, it's called the command prompt. So, I think Mac has like the terminal or iTerm, and then Windows is the command prompt. If you're not familiar with this, it's okay. Eventually, you will be, but it kind of looks a little bit like this. And you may have seen it when you're like watching a movie or TV and someone's like typing and they're like, I'm hacking into the mainframe. They're really not. This is just a way to interact with the computer. And it doesn't give you like a user interface, really. You're just like typing commands in, and it can look scary, but if you just like slowly read one line by line, you'll realize, okay, this is like plainly most straightforwardly telling me what's going on in the computer and what to do next. So now that we kind of have an understanding of Git, what's GitHub? And it's just a web-based platform for developers to store code on the cloud. What does that mean? It's just a website. It's literally just a website that uses Git to show all the changes you made throughout history to your code, and it's stored on the cloud. So it kind of makes it easy for you to share your code with others. I think back in the day, before I even was a developer, people were like zipping the the folders of their code and like sending it to other people through email and stuff like that, which again, you can see how difficult that would be to manage version control and all that. So now with GitHub, you can just see the changes. You're seeing everything that happened, and you can just send over a link to people, rather than like emailing them or slacking them or whatever way that you would send code. So I'm just going to show you a little bit of what GitHub looks like if you've never been on the site. So you have a GitHub profile, kind of like how other social media sites have a profile. It has a little bit about myself on the left, and then it also lists my repositories. And repositories are just folders or containers of code. So one of my repositories is a social card generator. And then if we click in to one of the repositories or the project containers, it'll show you like a list of different files that you used for that project. So my social card generator has a git ignore file, it has a readme file, it has a JavaScript file called generate social image.js, and it also has a package.json. It's okay if you don't know what these are, but like they're just code. They're just files with code in them. And it also, like, if you notice right here, it'll say like this was last updated 18 days ago and this file was updated 20 days ago. So you kind of see when changes were made and what happened. If you click one of the files, you can also actually see the code. So here's just a screenshot of me writing not that great code. I'm just like defining a few variables, but here's what's inside of the generate social image.js. You can also get a chance to see these snapshots or changes in your code over time. People call these commits. So as you can see here on January 14th, I made a new commit. And I kind of give a description of why I made that commit. It says I added a comment response if a contributor already assigned themselves. You can also see on July 12th, B. Dougie merged the pull request, and you can see on July 10th, MT Foley, who's another user, made some updates to these files. One reason why this is good is like if you found out there's a bug, like let's say I introduced a bug on January 14th, we can always roll back to this version pretty easily. You can also, if you saw code in the code base and you're like, I'm not really sure I'm understanding what's going on here or why this is happening or why this person wrote this code, you can always reach out and be like, hey, B. Dougie, why did you write this code? What does this mean? Help me out. Also, I want to let y'all know GitHub is not the only site that provides a user interface for version control. GitHub is just one of the most common. Um, it has over 73 million users. So over 73 million developers or maybe product managers and stuff like that are using GitHub today. But there's also GitLab, there's Bitbucket, there's Gitbucket, there's AWS Code Commit, and there's SourceForge. I just want to make y'all aware of that just in case you start a job and maybe you're expecting that they'll open up GitHub and then you see Bitbucket, because that did happen to me at my first internship. I was like, what's Bitbucket? And I found out it was almost the same thing as GitHub. So cool. Now you know what Git is, you know what GitHub is. How can you store your code on GitHub? Basically, the first step you want to do is create a GitHub account on github.com and install Git via your terminal. I considered us like doing this live, but I figured sometimes live demos have a lot of errors, so feel free to just go back to these slides in the future. But I took a couple screenshots of what that might look like. So when you're signing up for GitHub, it has this cool little space like interface, and it asks you to enter your email and your password and all that, whatever you do when you sign up for websites. And then also what it looks like to install Git on your computer. You'll do that in the terminal or the command prompt. And you can Google how to install Git, and it'll give you the lines that you need to do. Basically, this screenshot is from a user that is using an Ubuntu operating system, so it may not look the same for you. It may look a little different if you're using Windows or Mac. All right, step 2, now that we created our GitHub account and we installed Git, we're going to go ahead and create a repository on GitHub. So basically, you'd head on over, navigate over on GitHub to this area where it says new repository. You would click on that, and it will pull up a screen or a page. I don't know, whatever you want to call it. And it will ask you to like insert certain values, like what do you want the repository to be called? What's the description? Do you want it to be public or do you want it to be private? Like, do you want to like not show anybody your code yet? Are you not ready? Those are like some of the options you'll have. Then step 3 is I suggest just following the setup instructions for GitHub and I'll show you that on this screen. So after you press create repository and you filled in all those values, GitHub will suggest a couple of steps for you. And for a long time when I was in my coding bootcamp, I would just copy and paste each line. I didn't know exactly what each of them did. I just knew that it got my code from my local computer and uploaded it to GitHub. So for now, like you can just keep copying and pasting and then take some more time to like understand what each line is doing. I'm actually going to go through what each line is doing just if everyone's curious, but don't pressure yourself too much. Like for me, when I'm learning to code, I know like a lot of people like to understand the why first, but I try to just do it first and then figure out why something worked or something happens. Because I feel like sometimes when I try to understand the why a little too much, I hold myself back and I move a little bit slower than I wanted to. So one of the first lines says echo, and then it has quotes and a hashtag my first website, another quote, and then these like carrots and readme.md. Like, what does that even mean? Basically, that's just creating a readme. And that's just a markdown file that'll show up when someone goes over to your repository. And it's just saying, I want this readme to have the title, my first website. And let me show you what that looks like. Basically, once I ran that, it created this README called readme.md, and the title right here says my first website. If you want to edit it, you can go ahead and click this little pencil icon. It's a little small, so I apologize. But basically, you can click that little pencil icon and give some more context onto like what this project is doing and why it was made. The next line is git init. And that basically is just saying I want to initialize or indicate that my project will be using Git. And this should generate a file called .git in your project. So here's just a screenshot of me with my local folder on my computer, and I'm inside of the terminal, and I have a folder called my first website, and I run the words git init in it in it, but I run the words git init inside of the project, and basically it was successful. The next line is git add, and you would often follow that with like a file name, like of whatever file that you changed. And git add is basically just doing what it says. It's adding a new or changed file to be pushed up to GitHub. So any files that you changed or any new files that you created, you want to add them to this whole process. Then you also have git commit -m. And in quotes, it says first commit. What does that mean, right? Git commit is just saving the changes you made throughout history. It's saving that snapshot that you just did after you added all the files. You want to say, I'm saving these as well. And then the -m is just indicating that you want to insert a message here. And that message is just a note of why you made the changes. That way, when you look back at your code, you're not sitting there like, I have no clue why I did this. That happens to me all the time. And I always have to go back and read my commits and say, oh, yeah, I added this because of this situation. And then we're getting close to the end. You also have Git branch. Basically, this enables you to name the version of your code. So maybe you want to just call it the ticket name, or you're saying this is production code. Well, all those versions that I showed you earlier, this is like your opportunity to name it. Then you have Git remote add origin and this long URL. For a long time, I was like, what is this? I have no clue why I'm copying and pasting it, but it's essentially just connecting your local code on your computer to the repository on GitHub. So once you go to this URL, it just pulls up that repo that we made on GitHub, or that you've seen in the past screenshots, called My First Website. And it's just saying, hey, after we've added all the files, we've saved them, we want to push them particularly to this repo on GitHub. You also have git push -u origin main, and basically that's like the last and final step. You're saying I want to push all of these changes and new files to my GitHub repo. Now, that's basically all there is to it. I essentially just copy and paste all of those until I started to gain more of an understanding of Git and GitHub, and I got a chance to do a little bit more advanced things. But if you're sitting here saying like, girl, that's nice and all, but I'm not ready for the terminal. It looks a little too scary for me. I don't want to touch it. There are alternatives. You can use GitHub Desktop. And what GitHub Desktop is, it's just a desktop app that allows you to like drag and drop files or click buttons. You don't have to touch the terminal at all. Or you can just go to github.com and there's an area for you to just drag and drop your files there. Might be a little bit more easy since most of us are used to doing that in other projects or like Microsoft Word or PDFs and stuff like that. You're used to just uploading files. So that might be a good way to start off. And then once you start getting used to the terminal, you can go ahead and transition into using Git. And that is basically it. I want to thank y'all for having me to talk here. And I want to encourage you to keep shining, keep pushing through. I know JavaScript and web development and Git can feel really hard and overwhelming, but it'll definitely start clicking for you. And that is it. Let me head on over.
Thank you so much, Rizèl. That was wonderful. I love how many insights you shared there from a beginner's perspective. I think seeing all of those terminal commands in one go can be kind of overwhelming, I find.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So, seeing those and just saying, not only do you, just copy them over and sort of try and piece together what they do, but also try and say like, all right, there are alternatives, for example,
Yeah.
the desktop and all of that. That's really encouraging, I think. And,
I
I
hope
find that
so.
I'd love to share, if I may, from my perspective. When I started out with Git, it was super confusing at first. I didn't know what I was doing.
Me
So,
too. I literally it didn't click for me until I started my job, to be honest. Yeah.
oh yeah, like same here. It wasn't until I started working that it truly clicked for me. And even so, like I've heard from some of the folks that have been around for longer than I am, they always say like, at first you don't get Git,
Yeah.
then you think you get Git, but then you get more experience with Git and you realize you don't get Git at all.
No, that's so true. I found out there's so many commands that I've never used before.
Totally. Now, that's not to discourage anybody.
Yeah.
It's to understand, like, it's one thing that I'm trying to really like drive home when it comes to, software development. It's to be like, it's like Barb and Zach said last week at our guest session. It's about being comfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Occasionally, you're just going to be a little bit uncomfortable, and it's working through that helps. But
Yeah.
enough of me. I want to say thank you so much, Rizèl, and I want to give folks the opportunity to ask some questions. And we've actually got already a couple of questions.
Yay.
So if I may, I'm just going to start bringing them up. Folks, write your questions in the chat. We'll get us through as many as we can, time permitting. I don't want to keep Rizèl too much, but
No. I'm happy to ask all the questions. I mean, answer all the questions. I got too excited. Yeah.
awesome. Thank you so much. So let's start with Maria here. Thanks a lot, Rizèl. Is there any way to auto push the code during work?
Um, I don't know if I understand. Could I have more context on like the auto push?
Yeah, I wonder if that means that as could it mean that as you save files, they get pushed automatically?
Oh,
And yeah,
I think you can sync it, but most likely I think a best practice would be to like as you make changes, then push those changes because you want to be able to track them properly. What are your thoughts, Ramon?
yeah. There's actually a couple of. I'm a big fan of because when you're adding files to a commit, you can either add a lot of changes into one big chunky commit,
Yeah.
or have a smaller series of commits. And I think early in my career, I kind of became more comfortable with having smaller commits so that I could track down where I make mistakes.
Yeah, I definitely appreciate smaller commits too for that reason. Like I'm like, oh man, I introduced a bug, so I can easily just remove that like one line change that I did rather than like, oh, I changed a million files. So although I do think there might be a way, I don't use it often because I don't think that I think it would it would create problems for me, definitely.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Here we got a question from Alan. How do you move your code to your web server?
Ooh. Okay, that's a good question. Does he mean to like just the server in general? So usually there's a couple of ways. I think after you place it on GitHub, there's something called GitHub Pages where you can host your code there. There's also different tools like Heroku that allow you to move your code to a server or Netlify. Netlify is one I really am a big fan of because again, there you can drag and drop or you can connect it to your GitHub. Profile or your GitHub repository, and anytime you make a change and push it, it'll be live on Netlify.
I'm sending out all these links. Thank you so much for sharing them.
Cool.
So, next question. Question for Rizèl. I heard GitHub described as the social medium for Git, and I think a lot of it is based around sharing and showing. Apart from the settings on your repository, what is shown to other users as a default and what is hidden? Can anyone find my profile and see what I work on?
That is a great question. You can
Hmm.
you can hide a lot and you can show a lot. So like you can decide that you don't want that particular repository or that particular project to be shown, so you can hide that and you can also show it. Oftentimes, if you're like at a company and working for like a job that has proprietary code, it won't show all the commits that you have. But I think mainly it shows projects that you've starred, which is like projects you've liked, projects you created and you're okay with showing the public that you created them. um you can also follow people on there, so they have like a little timeline or news feed that'll be like, oh, Rizèl just followed Ramon. um but those are the things I can think of from the top of my mind.
Awesome. Thank you. Got a question here. How can I contribute to an open source project in GitHub?
Yay! Such an exciting question.
Yeah.
So I know Ramon linked one of my blog posts called Conquering the Fear of Contributing to Open Source. So I would definitely encourage you to read that. Although it doesn't sound like you're that scared. Sounds like you're excited to jump in. So I would say one of the things you can do is go on firsttimersonly.com.
Oh,
Um yeah,
I
that's a
don't know
good
that
one.
one.
Yeah, I hope I have it right. Let me just search it before I'm lying to y'all. Okay, yes. This is a good one. They have a couple links. The first link helps you go through the flow of what it's like to contribute to an open source project. Just because the flow is a little bit different. And after that, they have a couple links to help you find good first issues. And good first issues are usually issues for beginners or people who are new to the project. I would encourage you to find those and read the read the project's documentation. They'll tell you how to assign a ticket to yourself. They'll tell you like how they prefer for you to make a pull request and other formatting and stuff like that. But that's what I would suggest. Firsttimersonly.com.
Awesome. That's what I was going to confirm. I'm going to post that in the chat. Awesome. Thank you so much, Rizèl. These are great questions. Let's go to Nua.
Yeah,
Lindsay's asking, I know, right? Lindsay's asking, what is a pull request and how to properly request one on someone else's repository?
Oh, that's a good question. I was considering adding it to the presentation, but I was like, I don't want to overwhelm people. Basically, a pull request. A pull request is, how can I like explain it in layman's terms? It's essentially when you want to make a change to some code, but before you like merge it in or add it to that main or production code, you'll make a pull request and say like, hey, I want to actually change this variable or add this function. And it gives people a chance to, or gives other developers a chance to review the code beforehand. And then they'll be like, okay, it's good to go. Looks great. We can merge it in. How you can request one is a little difficult. Well, not a little difficult, but let me see if I can find a link for how to create a pull request.
I think I think GitHub provides some pretty nice documentation on that, unless I'm mistaken. If I may, I'd love to share a metaphor. To share a little metaphor.
Yes.
One way that I like to think of pull requests is kind of like a gift that you're giving somebody, where you say, hey, thank you so much for this project. I've made some changes, and what I'd love to gift you is these changes, right? Like a chunk of changes. Would you like to incorporate them or merge them into your project? And so they can take a look and accept that gift, otherwise known as merging, or say, hey, actually, this is a great gift, and I don't want to be ungrateful, but could you actually make some smaller changes here? This is how I would like it to be.
I love that.
Thank you. So creating a pull request on GitHub Docs. I think I've got it. I'm going to go ahead and share that link. Awesome. Cool. Awesome. Oh, here we go. Here's a question from Mike Coding Adventure asks, what is the cloud?
What is the cloud? Oh. Hopefully I can answer this question.
I am confident that you'll be able to answer it in a way that I think is sort of, because this is your understanding of the cloud, because the cloud itself is an abstract concept.
Yeah.
So hearing your perspective of that is going to be super interesting as well.
Yeah, I will say the cloud is basically just, I think. Do you want to take a stab at it and then I'll add on to it? Sorry.
Absolutely.
I don't feel like I'm going to have a great way to describe it for beginners.
Totally. Rizèl, I hope I didn't put you on the spot.
No, it's okay.
I can give it a stab. And I'll be honest, I will probably get it wrong as well. Yeah. The way I like to think of the cloud is a series of people like to joke that, the cloud is just someone else's computer. Yeah. And what that means essentially is a server and or a series of servers. The cloud is a service that is storing stuff or working on stuff that related to your application that's not on your computer. That's on someone else's computer. For example, GitHub, you put your stuff on GitHub, it goes to the cloud. If you do, say, if you've got your email with Gmail, your email is on the cloud.
Yeah.
So it's just a way of describing places for storage and processing that are not your own computer. How'd I do?
You did good. You did really great. I was like gonna start going into serverless. I'm like, no, I'm making it way too complicated. So no, that was really good. Yes, it is basically, I agree with you. It's basically just putting your code on someone else's server so that other people can see it. So I love that description.
Thank you. Yeah. Hope that answers your question. Dark Gamer Plays asks, what is the fork command in Git mean?
Ooh, that just means you want to copy that repository, or that project. So you can do that and like play around with the project, or sometimes when you make open source contributions, they prefer for you to copy the project first and then make your pull request. So it just means copying.
Exactly. I think that's perfect. Thank you. Hope that answers your question.
Yeah.
Dwayne asks, Rizèl, can you recommend a Git or GitHub tutorial?
Ooh, GitHub does have the GitHub Learning Lab. Let me see if I can
Yes,
find
GitHub
it.
Learning Lab. I've seen that. I've sent that to folks as well. It is marvelous. I've got a
Yeah,
link here,
thank you. Yeah.
lab.github.com. Lab.
Yeah, that has a good like a lot of stuff. It doesn't just do Git, it also does HTML and like GitHub Actions and stuff like that. So it's a good tutorial.
Awesome. Faraz got a question. How can I work with my team in GitHub?
Ooh. So I guess it depends on what you're trying to do, but if you're creating a new team, um, you can actually there's a section in GitHub where you can create an organization and then you can add all of those people there and then you can work together there. But if you just mean like how can you like make contributions with other people, you can just send them like your repository, your project, and they can go ahead and make pull requests to your project. You can make pull requests and you all can do code reviews on each other and say, okay, like how Ramon mentioned the gift analogy. You can say, okay, I like this gift, maybe change a couple things. That's how I would suggest working with your team in GitHub.
Excellent. Very well put. Um, Sadiq asks, what does origin mean in Git?
Oh, you know what? I don't even know. Let me look it up.
Totally. I can give it a try too, if I may.
Yeah.
Um, origin. So what we're doing is when we're pushing somewhere, you remember from the presentation, we were doing a git push command. And we had what that origin represented is what I like to think of it as like a label for a URL where that code lives. Now, most of the
Ooh.
time, by default, that's going to be the GitHub URL. So origin, when you're saying, hey, git push to origin, we're saying, hey, could you push to that URL, please? What you can do in
Mm,
a Git project is have multiple what are called remotes. So remotes can have, for example, one GitHub link, and maybe there's another GitHub link that you call Upstream, or there's and you can give it any name you want. It's just
yeah.
that Git by default likes to call this one origin.
Oh, I learned something new today.
This is what I love about these experiences. We're all learning
Yeah,
constantly. We
yeah,
never stop learning.
definitely.
um, let's see. Oh, here's a question from Vasco who asks, where did the change happen in Git terminal on VS? So if I understand correctly your question, please correct me if I'm wrong, is how do we see the Git terminal changes in VS Code? Which, in case you're not
Oh,
familiar, VS Code is a text editor for writing your code that lives on your computer. It's called Visual Studio Code. And what Visual Studio Code, oh, sorry, Rizal, I want to give you a chance to.
no, no. I was prepping my answer. Go, you could keep going.
No. I want this is your Q&A. Like I'm here to help.
Okay. I actually wanna I don't have let me share can I share my screen and just show them really
Totally.
quickly? Yeah.
Totally.
So I don't have a project up right now, but like Ramon was mentioning, VS Code is like a code editor or text editor where you can write your code in. There's also Sublime Text and Atom, but you can see your code changes or like your changes for Git in VS Code if you click this little icon here. It's a source control icon. And
Yeah.
if I actually had code here, it would be like, oh, this commit was made, this was changed. And you can also pull up a terminal inside of VS Code if you just pull it up this way, or you go to view and press. I think there's a section that says show terminal. Yeah, view terminal.
Ah,
So
nice.
that's another method as well.
Awesome.
Cool. I'll stop sharing.
Thank you.
Ooh.
All good. All good. Cool. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. Um, so here we've got a question. How do we what's the process to push code into a Reaper, and how do you connect from a local computer to GitHub?
Gotcha. The process that I showed in the slide deck is kind of how you would push code into a repo. So feel free to rewatch this in the future. But essentially, once you create a repo, GitHub kind of gives you some guided instructions, and they had a couple commands like git init, git add, git commit, git push, and those are like the main commands you're going to use to push your code from your local to your actual, from your local computer to GitHub. Yeah.
That's a great answer. Thank you. Oh, here's a question from Tomasz. Rizèl, I hope you don't mind us asking, but could you tell us what level of knowledge in JavaScript you had when you landed your first job?
Oh, okay. Good question. I thought you were going to say now. I'm like, I don't know. I think when I landed my first job, I was still a little shaky on JavaScript. I would say I was still beginner. And I still feel like I'm beginner today sometimes because JavaScript has so many new different things that I'm not used to. But I would say I knew enough to like create an array, to manipulate an array, manipulate strings and stuff like that. Things that could help me pass an interview.
That's great to know. Actually, that's what we've been doing in the last 2 weeks. In
Yeah.
week 1, we did array and string manipulation.
Hey, okay, so y'all might be ready.
That's great to hear. Thank you, Rizèl. Aha! Woohoo! Here's a question from Kaiga. If you did a git init into a certain folder, but it wasn't the one you wanted to initialize, what you should do in order to undo that git init?
Oh, I do that all the time. You can do rm and then -rf dot git, I believe, and that's
RM.
exactly, yeah, rm -rf or rm space -rf and then .git. Let me type it in the private chat too, just to make sure.
I think I sent it. I hope I sent it out
Oh,
properly. Let's
perfect.
see. Yes. Whew. Okay, I got
Cool.
it right.
Yeah, that's just saying like remove that from like remove Git from the folder you didn't want it in.
Excellent. Awesome. Good to know. Oh, we got a question here from OS White. When would you recommend starting to learn the terminal?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I would say it's kind of up to you, but I would say it's probably a good time to start now. If you
Mhm.
wanted to, if you feel comfortable, this is a great time to start practicing. Now that you know JavaScript or you're learning JavaScript and you know how to build websites, it's good to like start practicing with the terminal, start pushing code to GitHub. I would say before your first job, maybe it's a good time to learn that.
Awesome. Uh, question from Margie. What's the difference between a commit and a branch?
Okay, good question. So a commit is you're saying I want to save this code or I want to take a snapshot of this code of the changes that I just made. And a branch is you're just like naming the version of that code. So you're saying like this is my local code, this is my production code, this is the code that I use to test.
Awesome. See what else we got. Other questions.
I love how everyone has like all these good questions. They're thinking.
That's amazing. Like folks,
Yeah.
and what I love about this group of people is that they ask any question they have, and they challenge me to think outside the box as well. It's
Yeah,
amazing.
I love it.
Um, cool. Ashley asks, when you install Git on your local computer in the command line, is this just a connection that allows you to update your raw files and push back to your local?
I I'm not sure how to answer that. I think so, yes.
Yeah. Is it just a connection that allows you to update your raw files and push back to your local? I would say, yeah. I think I would also tentatively say
Yeah.
yes. It's a
I
way to
think
keep
so.
that flow going back to your main repository.
Yeah, that I like that description, yes.
We got a question from Ida asking, thank you so much, Rizèl. My question is, what does upstream mean? I've read that it's the tracking branch, but I don't actually get it.
I don't think I have the greatest explanation for upstream. So, Ramon, if you do, could you or I'll just, like, Google it just to
No,
make
no,
sure. Yeah,
I'll give it a try. It's probably,
yeah.
I hope I don't flub the explanation too much, but I'll give it a try. So upstream is a name for a remote. Do you remember how we were talking about origin before? An origin is the name of a remote. That is a shortcut name to a URL. Commonly done when you make a fork of a GitHub project, you will when you pull that, when you clone that, when you make a copy on your local computer, the remote will be called origin, which is the link to your fork of the project on GitHub.
Yeah.
What a lot of people do to add a remote to the main project, so the main copy, the one you forked from, the name they give to that remote instead of origin is Upstream. So Upstream is kind of like a shortcut name for the original copy of the project.
I like that. Yeah. It
I hope
is.
that makes sense. Awesome. Nika asks, how do software projects split their software into release channels, branches like stable, beta, or testing?
Ooh, that's a good question. Um, I've been at a couple startups and we don't okay, so I know that for the startups I've been at, we've had like production, like I said, which is the one that everyone could see. Sometimes they call it prod. You also have staging, or that's like a place where developers test. Um, you would also have like UAT, where maybe you'll have some users testing there, and then you have your local one. I don't know if I've never seen beta. I think usually when people say beta, that's like they're saying although this is in production, it's not like our final like version of our code or like what we really want to get at in the future. Like where this is the beginnings of our project. Um, but it depends on the company, so it's hard for me to define exactly how they split the releases.
Yeah, I think that I would agree with that. I think that's my experience as well. Cool. Got a question from Sadiq asking, in GitHub it tells me to create a key, and whenever I want to push my code, it asks, but the key is large and hard to remember. What shall I do?
Is
And I
it?
think this is referring to the SSH key. I could be wrong.
Oh,
Or
oh,
maybe a password?
yeah. There's a lot of keys
Yeah.
in GitHub. There's a lot of keys. So I'm not sure, but I don't try to like remember them. I usually try to for Macs, you can like save it.
Hmm.
Like if there's a RSA key, I I think I'm not too sure how to answer this question. Let me
Yeah,
think.
if it's referring to a password, for example, I would highly recommend using a password manager.
Yeah.
Um, totally for things like one password or a LastPass, I think it's called. Sorry, I'm
Mhm.
very
No,
I
that's
use one
right.
password by oh, that is right. Okay.
Yeah.
Whew. Like definitely don't recommend reusing the same password for stuff.
Yeah.
Um, so if you can use a password manager, and then you'll just have to remember one password, which is your master password, as it's called.
Okay.
Um, cool. Aha. Uh, My Coding Adventure asks, if we make a branch main/master, how do we change that branch to a new origin/master so that when you upload it, your code goes to the correct repository?
Okay, if you want to change branches, there's a command called git checkout -b, and then you would give it its branch name. So if
Yeah,
you like branching off of master main, you would do git checkout -b and then the new branch name that you want.
awesome.
Or yeah. I hope that helps.
Yeah, no, that's super helpful. Thank you. So many questions. I'm so happy.
I know.
How do I find better open source projects that I can contribute?
Okay.
And I think we kind of answered this question with the what was it called? The
Firsttimersonly.com.
yeah. Let me throw up that link again.
I could try to think of more ways. I know GitHub has if you go to github.com/topics, that can also help you to find different open source projects depending on like what category they're in. So like maybe you'll find the CSS project that you're into. Yeah, I sometimes just Google, but you're right, there's not a great way. Oh, actually, sorry, I'm like having a long train of thought here. There's
All
another
good.
project. And my manager actually made it, and it's kind of a way to find the projects that are trending right now.
Is it
Uh,
called, because I think I might know it, is it called open sourced?
yes, it is. And he has like
Oh.
a newer one called hot.opensauce.pizza. So let me
Ooh,
paste that in too. So I
thank
think
you.
open source helps you to track the open source projects that you're contributing to. And then hot.opensauce helps you to find the like most popular ones.
Ooh, this is great.
Yeah.
Well, definitely putting that in the chat. Cool. Yogeshok asks, I'm used to doing commits in just small functions, which I add to my project. Is it good, or should I try to do commits as min as possible, as they just make project commits part bulky and hard to understand? I think, correct me if I'm wrong, you're asking whether it's good to have small commits or larger commits. Did I understand that right?
That's what I'm reading too.
Yeah.
And I think we talked about this a little bit earlier, but I prefer small commits because then it's easier to go back and be like, okay, I just changed one line rather than doing like this large commit and then being like, I have no clue where this bug is. So I agree with what you're initially doing to make small commits.
Same here. Robiel asks, how can I easily get into all of these Git commands? Check out some of the links that we've been posting, like the GitHub Lab, the GitHub Labs. Check those out. I'll post another link. But yeah, there's lots of resources, but that's the one we're going to recommend here. So here we go.
Yeah, there's a ton of resources. They're just
Totally.
not coming to mind.
So Harold asks, in your experience, which do you prefer to use, the console commands or a desktop assistant to use Git?
Okay, I will say when you're just starting off, if you're not too comfortable with the console, I would suggest the desktop assistant. But right now, because I'm very familiar and comfortable with the console, I use that one and I prefer that one. It's all your preference, though.
Totally. There is no wrong way.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for your answer. Josue asks, can you explain what is CI/CD?
Yeah. CI/CD means continuous integration and continuous deployment. And that is just a method that people use or software projects use to constantly release code so that they're not releasing as many bugs. They also want to like constantly test their code, and they have like this automated process that's like constantly releasing, constantly testing.
Awesome. Just sending out a link to GitHub's docs on continuous integration.
Oh, thank you.
I realize I might have sent one or two links before in Spanish. I apologize if I did. It's my browser being fussy. Oh, I love this question so much, and I can't wait to bring it up. Is basic knowledge of HTML, CSS, and JavaScript enough to start contributing to open source projects?
I think so. Yes, definitely. I think you can even contribute to open source projects without even knowing code. People often suggest like, well, not knowing code, but not knowing as much code. People often suggest like contributing to the documentation. There's also some projects have this thing called like a triage role where you're essentially helping to triage some of the tickets and saying, okay, this is ready to be reviewed, or this is a good first issue, help's wanted here. So you can start now even if you don't know how to code, and you can figure out ways for you to get comfortable within that code base.
I love that. Mehmet asks, is there any way to create a nested folder in the terminal? I do that by dragging and dropping in the terminal, and I'm able to create one folder but not nested ones.
Oh, good question. Do you mean like you're in a folder and you want to create another one? You can run this line called I feel I don't know how it's actually pronounced, but I always say mkdir.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. So MKDIR.
That's how I call it too.
Okay, cool.
Mkdir, yeah.
I think it's mkdir. Mkdir. Yeah, and you're essentially saying you want to create a new directory or you want to create a new folder, and you'll type the folder name, but you have to do it when you're inside of the initial folder that you want to nest the new folder in.
Yeah, that's a good question.
Yeah, that was a good question.
Ooh, Juan's asking a question that I actually don't know much about. Maybe off topic, but how do you imagine the future of open source after the previous week's incidents on open source projects?
Oh, are you talking? Yeah, there was an incident. I think of people like deleting their yeah.
Gotcha.
I don't know if I'm allowed to say that much, but what I will say is that when you're installing npm packages or different projects or using other people's projects, definitely look for how many people have downloaded it and how often it's used. Do your best research on it before you install it into your project. That's what I can say.
Thank you. Sorry, I completely blanked on what the
No
insanity
worries.
was.
No worries.
Um,
Time passes so quick. Like last week feels like a long time ago.
Totally. Got a question from Dwayne. Rizèl, can you recommend a Git/GitHub tutorial? We've answered this question. I'm going to throw up a link again to the GitHub Labs because they're super helpful and a
Yeah,
lot of fun.
I agree.
Oh, Maria asks, this is a great question. Can anyone make changes to your Git repository without your permission?
Oh, that is a good question. So I don't think without your permission necessarily. So you can put settings on your repository for who can merge code. And basically we talked about doing a pull request, right? So if someone does a pull request and says, hey, I want to make some changes to your code, you can set settings on your repository that say no, people can't merge it unless I like approve or unless somebody else who I trust approves those changes. So there's things in place to stop that from happening.
Yeah, thank you for your question.
Yeah, great question.
Got a question from Grish. I hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. I apologize. Is GitHub only for code or can I add other kinds of projects? I love this
Hmm.
question.
That is a good question. I guess it's most often used for code, but I have used it for like I teach a coding boot camp and I just used it to put up documentation. So you can just use it to store words or images, I guess. I don't think GitHub does that well with storing videos, especially if they're long, but you can store some other things.
Oh yeah, totally. Like a lot of people, for example, will store, for example, they will write stuff like they'll write their blog posts, which aren't technically code,
Yeah,
but
that's true.
they'll have their blog posts on Git. One thing I do,
Yeah.
for example, is since I have my website on GitHub, I put my presentation slides there as well as
Oh,
PDF.
that's smart. I didn't even
Yeah.
think of that. That's so smart. I
I mean,
also use Oh, go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
no, please. I'm interrupting you.
Oh, I was gonna say I also use it to like now that you bring that up, I also use it to like track like my accomplishments, like if I had any wins, so I can go back for peer review and just copy and paste those in.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. In fact, you reminded me of something I do as well. Like in a private repository, whenever somebody says something nice to me, or like when I get a word of praise from, say, a boss or someone I admire or somebody that I don't know, I have a little repository called Kind Words where I just store those,
That's
and
so
it's just for me.
smart. Yeah, that's so nice. You can go back and just if you're having a bad day, you're like, I did do that.
Totally, totally. Awesome. Let's see what else we got. Question for result. MT asks, first, great presentation. Thanks for being here. Second,
Oh, thank
what are the
you.
most common what are the most common commit message conventions? Ooh, such as feat used to introduce new features or fix used for patching bugs, etc.
Oh, I love this question. I was considering bringing this up. So, just to give more context to anybody listening, when you do a Git commit, there is like a best practice or a convention that people suggest. They often say like started off with the word feat, like she's saying or MT saying to use to introduce new features or fix bugs. There's also chore. I think to be honest, I think you just already listed the most common ones like feat, fix, and chore. I don't know if I'm missing any others.
I think there's a couple. I could be wrong. Oh, yeah. Build, chore, CI, docs, style,
Okay,
refactor, perf, which I'm guessing is performance,
okay,
test, and more. Um,
okay.
the only reason I know
Um,
this is because for clarity, if I may add to your answer, Rizèl, if you don't mind,
yeah.
uh, these are called conventions, right? Some people like to have these, some people prefer not. I, for example, like to write my commits in the present tense. This commit
Mm,
does thing, but some people like to write in the past tense, fixed bug that blah blah blah.
yeah.
Uh, these depend on the project. These depend on the team. This depend on you if you're working for yourself. I have lost count of the number of commits where that are just called do the thing.
Yup. Same.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wrote, "This works." I'm
Yep.
like
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, no, it totally happens. Like it's up to you. What MT's mentioning here is something called conventional commits. I'm going to post a link if I may. And what these are is a sort of proposed standard that folks say, hey, this is what we this is a and when I say standard, I don't mean everybody does this. It
Yeah,
means a couple people got together and said, this is what we agree is one of the best ways to do it. But it doesn't
yeah,
mean it's the best way.
yeah. Agreed. That was a
Yeah.
great description.
Sorry, I tend to ramble.
No, no, it
um,
was really good.
Thank you. Oh, here's a question. Hi, Rizèl. Do you think Git is necessary for a tester career path?
Ooh, that is a good question. So, I've never done, like, a QA or software engineering test role, but I imagine you still probably should learn Git. They're probably writing unit test, or Cypress test or something like that that do need to be pushed up to GitHub. So I would suggest still learning it.
Great answer. Thank you. Grisha says GitHub free for everyone. Um,
Ooh, that's a good question. It's kind of. So they have they have different tiers. So you can generally have it be free for you, but if you're a company, you may have some more um things that you want. Like there's GitHub Enterprise that costs a little bit more money. They may have like some extra features in there that like teams would benefit from. But if you're a single like user, it is free for you for forever. And
awesome.
who hosts it? I don't GitHub host it. They
Yeah.
don't-
I'm not sure. Okay, so we've been at this for an hour. I
Oh,
want to, if I may, one more question. How does that sound, Rizèl?
sounds great.
Awesome. So here we go from Oleg. What would be more beneficial, to have a big number of repos with small projects or just a few, but with more complex and complete projects with many technologies involved, complete websites, etc.?
You know, I used to be concerned about this.
Hmm.
Before, like, I would be like, "Oh my goodness," because I was in boot camp, I have all these like little projects, and there's like so many like a big number of repos, and maybe people are looking at this and thinking, "Yuck." But uh, um, once I started working at GitHub, I realized my manager had like over 100, and as you can see, I had 100. So I would say show what like I would say host as much projects or post as much projects on GitHub as you want. If you feel more comfortable with having some of them be private, then put them in private and hide them, not hide them, but like make sure you get to see or you control who gets to see it. And then you can also like feature which projects you want to be seen first on your GitHub profile, like when people go first to it. But I wouldn't worry too much. Have a mix.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you so much, Rizal. I think with that, I think I want to let you go and get some rest. This was so extraordinary, and I cannot thank you enough for taking the time. On behalf
Yeah,
of all of our learners, I want to say,
thank
wonderful
you.
presentation, wonderful answers, and yeah, this was
Yeah.
great.
Thank you so much. Thanks for being here and listening to me. Thanks for inviting me, and also thanks for helping me answer some of the questions.
Oh, I mean, that's just how it is, isn't it? Like there's just so many questions that and the great thing about being, someone who sorry, I promise I'm not going to ramble, but somebody
Oh,
who has experience, somebody who's a qualified engineer, we don't
yeah,
have the answers to
that's
everything.
true.
I don't have the answers to everything. So many times in this boot camp, I've had to say, do you know what? I'm not sure. Let's find out.
Yeah.
Totally. Well, this was wonderful. I just want to say thank you all so much for coming. If you're tuning in and you're like, "Hey, what's going on here?" We are doing two boot camps. One is a web development boot camp, and the other one is a JavaScript boot camp. Sign up at Class Central, as you can see here. If you've got further questions, go and follow. Hold up, let me do this right. I'm gonna put your Twitter URL into the chat. I
Hey.
highly recommend if you're on Twitter, giving Rizèl a follow. She is one of my favorite follows, and I say that with zero bias because it's true.
Aw, thank you. You're one of my
No,
favorite follows too.
you're very kind. Yeah, if you've got any questions, feel free to ask them in the forum, in the Discord. You know, let's be respectful of Rizèl's time. Do please ask her questions, but also, she's not going to be able to answer all of them. Like, we barely managed to scratch the surface of all the questions we
Oh,
had here.
wow.
So yeah, with that, I'll say thank you all so much for tuning in. I wish you a wonderful rest of your day. And Rizèl, thank you once again.
Thank you. Bye,
Take care,
y'all.
everybody. Bye.